Hey, greetings everyone. GleeCon is here, bringing you another episode of Lore of Warcraft. Thanks for tuning in. On the last episode, we started the slog in Stranglethorn Vales, where we have taken yet another zone that is way, way above our level range. That is going to necessitate a lot of grinding, and we have slammed our face up against that wall. Hopefully it'll go a little better on the next one. Kind of like on the last episode where just one character is a little more suited to it than the next. So I think on our next one it'll be a little easier. We've also been reading through the War of the Scaleborn. We're now on chapter 15. The last chapter, the war has kind of kicked off, kind of, because Raszageth led the attack against the Ordered Dragons. But now, in the most recent episode, chapter, Vyranoth heard about, one, that the Ordered Dragons have been stealing their babies, and two, of that Raszageth is kidnapped, and that's it. It broke her brain. She's now all in on being a primal, and I imagine the war is going to start just all systems go now. So stay a while and listen to chapter 15 of War of the Scaleborn. As Iridikron threatened war, Alexstrasza invited the Incarnates to a parley. Iridikron wanted Raszageth's release, while the Lifebinder wanted a promise of peace. However, Alexstrasza was not naive enough to think those goals were congruous. If freed, the Storm Eater would only continue to wreak havoc along the Broodlands' borders. Still, Alexstrasza wished to speak to the Stone-Scaled face-to-face. For the last 2 centuries, all their communications had been handled through the embassy at Wyrmrest Temple. If she was going to war against Iridikron and his primalists, she at least wanted the opportunity to take his measure. Titans knew he wouldn't listen to reason, but perhaps Alexstrasza could find a way to delay all-out war. Exceptional as they were, her flights would be outnumbered. They needed more time to prepare to meet the primalists in the field. Alexstrasza landed on the tundra of northern Kalimdor in the grey light of dawn, in a lonely, nameless stretch of land between Harrow's Deep and the Broodlands. Her talons broke through a light crust of ice and snow as the vastness of the northern tundra stretched before her. She sensed no sign of the Incarnates or primalists. For now, the aspects and their forces were alone. Mark my words, Iridikron only agreed to the parley as a distraction, Neltharion had said. He will take this opportunity to attack, but where and how, I cannot guess. To prepare for a surprise attack, the aspects worked together to plan their defenses. Malygos' army of illusory dragons took up positions in the Reach, on the Emerald Plains, and at the Azure Archives, making the aspects' forces appear a great deal larger than they actually were. Neltharion selected strategic choke points along the Broodlands' borders to lay with traps, then armed mortal villages with projectile weapons. The tribes in the Apex Canopy adopted the technology with surprising speed, but they had been associating with the Black Dragonflight for many years. If Alexstrasza craned her neck, she could just barely see the great spires of the Obsidian Citadel on the southern horizon. Neltharion had positioned a sizable battalion of blacks and reds there, along with scores of Draconid foot soldiers. If the Incarnates proved treacherous, the aspects would fall back to the Citadel while Neltharion took command of their forces. Alexstrasza did not expect Iridikron to attack the Citadel outright. The Reach was a far more likely target. For that reason, Alexstrasza had sent wing units from every flight to defend Raszageth's prison, as well as a legion of Draconid. Because the Incarnates could strike anywhere, the aspects had to prepare for war everywhere. I mislike this, Alexstrasza said, sniffing the air. His lip curled. Something is amiss. The air is too cold for this time of year, and the small creatures of the earth tremble in their burrows. We should keep to the skies. I agree, though Neltharion has asked us to remain grounded, Alexstrasza replied, turning her gaze to the earth warder who communed with the ground not 10 wing lengths from where they stood. Ysera joined Alexstrasza, her emerald scales glimmering in the morning light. Alexstrasza took comfort in her sister's stabilizing presence. The Black Dragonflight has established a perimeter of the area, Alexstrasza continued. I trust they will warn us of any impending danger. Besides, Iridikron would be unwise to test the might of 5 aspects at once. Ysera swept her tail along the ground, setting up a great fan of snow. Stalwart and brave as the green aspect might be, she hated conflict. Even so, Sarastraz said, giving his wings a restless shake, I can't help but be nervous. I share your concerns, my friend, Alexstrasza said gently, but I will not send another dragon to speak to Iridikron in my place. We must parley for peace. War would mean that we have failed. No, that I have failed in my charge to protect the flights of Azeroth at large. You could not fail us, Sarastraz made a rumbling noise in his throat. Besides, our kind was made for the defense of this world. To its defense we must come, even if it is against those we once called kin. I thank you for your faith, my old friend, Alexstrasza said, though she couldn't help thinking of the look upon Nosdormu's face during their last spectral council. She had asked him for news from the Timeways, and all he'd done was shake his head solemnly. The Bronze Flight was hard-pressed to find a future that avoided this conflict. So Alexstrasza could not bear to hear that the final pathway to peace had been lost, so the Bronze aspect had said nothing at all. Yeah, we already know that's how that's going to go. Nosdormu landed on Alexstrasza's left, pulling the lifebinder from her reverie. He gave her a nod. Malygos joined them on the ground just to the right of Neltharion. Half their escort remained in the skies, ever watchful for danger. In the east, the sunrise lacerated the horizon, leaving a bright gash of red light over the Broodlands. Alexstrasza's anxiety grew, and she began to wonder if the incarnates would appear at all. Tension stretched each second taut. Dragons paced and watched the skies. Others went about their duties, weaving enchantments and wards, communicating in low tones. Even Neltharion fidgeted, tapping his talons on stone. There they are, Sarastraz said quietly, narrowing his eyes. A small band of primal dragons appeared on the western horizon, led by Fyrakk. As they drew closer, Alexstrasza frowned. If I'm not mistaken, no dragon of Iridicon's description flies with Fyrakk. No, Sarastraz said, his eyes widening. I've seen the stone scale before. He isn't among them. Titans be good, Alexstrasza breathed. A spike of adrenaline hit her heart. Iridicon and Fyrakk had agreed to meet her at dawn. If the stone scaled was not here, did that mean he had gathered his forces to strike elsewhere? Neltharion, Alexstrasza called, turning to the Earth Warder. Do you sense the stone scaled in the vicinity? He is not among the Incarnate's delegates. No, Neltharion replied, but gave his escort hasty orders to search the area. 4 black dragons flew for the cardinal points, no doubt to warn the blacks at the Earth Warder's obelisks. I will send messengers to the Broodlands, Malygos said, opening several portals for his blues. Alexstrasza recognized the Obsidian Citadel, Vakthros, and Valdrakken in the portal's gleaming faces. Dread crept across the snow as Fyrakk approached. Alexstrasza had not seen her cousin since he had become an incarnate. Like the aspects, Fyrakk was wholly changed. The elements had charred his scales black and set his horns aflame. Great gouts of fire erupted along his spine, and his eyes blazed red. When he landed on the ground before Alexstrasza, the snow hissed under his feet. Fyrakk stood as tall as Alexstrasza did, a behemoth among the smaller primal dragons in his retinue. Even though she stood 10 wing lengths away from her cousin, she could feel the blistering heat rolling off his scales. Somehow his hatred for her burned hotter. The lifebinder stepped forward. Let us dispense with the pleasantries, cousin. Where is Iridicron?
The stone-scaled sends his regrets, cousin, Fyrakk said with a deep mountain-cracking chuckle. He is unable to attend today's parley.
Neltharion growled, tossing his head.
That was not the agreement. Enlighten me. What business of Iridicron's is more important than deciding the future of dragonkind?
I am not interested in discussion of dragonkind's future, Fyrakk said, turning on Neltharion. I am here to negotiate for the release of Raszageth the Storm-Eater. Until she is freed, there shall be no peace between the Incarnates and the Aspects.
Never,
Neltharion snapped, his fangs flashing.
Raszageth attacked the Reach without cause, killing hundreds of members of my flight. Such wounds cannot be forgiven or forgotten.
The flames blazed brighter along Fyrakk's spine.
You would speak of wounds when your very flights are a corruption of our kind. Fools! I should take your wings for that insult.
Enough! Alexstrasza shouted, slamming one forefoot into the ground. Ruby light burst from the impact, sending out a calming emanation to everyone around her. Fyrakk snarled, stepping back from the light. We did not come here to fight over past injuries, but to discuss the terms of Raszageth's release and a path to peace. If we must move forward without Iridicron, so be it.
There can be no peace, Alexstrasza, Fyrakk said. Not while my sister remains imprisoned.
It is a fitting punishment for her crimes against the Black Dragonflight, Alexstrasza said. Had she not attacked the Reach, we would never have had the cause to imprison her.
If that is your case, Fyrakk said, then you should renounce your titles, Alexstrasza, and submit yourself to the judgment of the Incarnates for your own crimes against our kind.
What crimes have I committed against you? Alexstrasza cried, stepping forward and spreading her wings to emphasize her words. For centuries I have worked to build peaceful relations between our kinds. I would never do anything to harm the Incarnates or the primal dragons who...
Before Alexstrasza could finish, Fyrakk snatched something from one of his retainers and hurled it to the ground. It slid for several wing lengths in the snow, coming to a stop in front of Alexstrasza. It was the talon-sundered corpse of a Titan forged. Alexstrasza's heart stuttered in her chest. She lifted her gaze to Fyrakk's, wary. All around her the other aspects went still. She could feel Neltharion's fury welling like magma, which contrasted with Malygos's icy hatred. Ysera lifted her head, appraising Fyrakk coolly. Ysera had never liked Fyrakk. His fiery temper had always been at odds with her gentle nature. Only Nusdormu remained unmoved. The bronze aspect's words came back to Alexstrasza in that moment, haunting her from so many years past. This course of action may provoke the very conflict you wish to avoid.
For centuries you and your keepers have stolen our eggs, Fyrakk said, his voice full of deadly malice. You took them, forced order magic upon them, and raised them as your own.
What proof do you have of these allegations? Alexstrasza said, stepping forward and curling her lip.
Griminoth,
Fyrakk said. A frost dragon stepped forward, carrying a round object between his small forearms. With great care, the Primalist set the artifact down on the ground between Fyrakk and the aspects. Weak sunlight glanced off the artifact's metal rings and toothy shattered glass. Inside, Alexstrasza could just see the remnants of a crushed whelp. Alexstrasza recognized the artifact immediately. It was one of the Titan Ford's egg carriers, a device they used to protect wild primal dragon eggs while en route to the Broodlands. She stared at the artifact, sinking her claws into the ground to steady herself, her mind racing as fast as her heart.
What say you to this?
Fyrakk bellowed at Alexstrasza, his words ringing across the empty plain.
You who swore that every dragon would be given a choice. You who swore our kind would not be forced to serve your Titan masters.
Lies,
Neltharion replied, making the whole of the earth quake under their feet.
You say this to slander us again. Just like you did by burning villages in our names.
That was you,
Fyrakk said with a snarl.
No, cousin, Alexstrasza replied. It was Razageth who burned the villages to the ground, aided by defectors from the Black Dragonflight.
Neltharion stepped forward and continued.
For decades, Iridikron sent her forth to burn villages in the Aspects' names, sowing terror and discord along our borders. I can see through your deception, Fyrakk. You seek to turn more against us with your lies.
You would compare the lies of our whelplings to those of insects, Fyrakk snapped. Mortal lives are meaningless.
No, Neltharion growled. But unlike you, I can see Iridikron's pathetic warmongering for what it is.
With a roar, Fyrakk charged at Neltharion. The Earth Warder bristled. Alexstrasza, acting wholly on instinct, launched herself forward and slammed into Fyrakk's unprotected flank, sending the Incarnate sprawling backward. Fyrakk slid in the snow, sending up a plume of steam in his wake. Alexstrasza landed with grace, then rose to her full height.
This was meant to be a parley,
she boomed, her scales blazing with ruby light. The primal dragons cowered before her, hiding their faces from her glowing form.
Instead, it has devolved into petty accusations and lies. If we are to find a path forward, we must put our differences aside and try to form some sort of understanding.
I have already said there will be no peace, Alexstrasza,
Fyrakk said, getting to his feet. He shook out his wings, glaring at her.
The Incarnates would never consider peace with monsters like you.
Alexstrasza narrowed her eyes and lowered her chin, expecting Fyrakk to strike. Neltharion and Nosdormu flanked her.
If you want to discuss peace, Fyrakk continued, either free Razageth or submit your own queen to us for penance. The Incarnates will accept nothing less.
No, Neltharion said. Razageth attacked the Reach without provocation, and did significant and lasting harm to the Black Dragon Flight. My flight will have justice.
Do you think we incarnates care about your petty justice?
Fyrakk asked, flames curling around his fangs.
No more talk. Produce Razageth or the Primalist march on Wormrest Temple now!
Is that where Iridikron is? Alexstrasza asked with a snarl. Is he breaking our pact and marching on neutral territory?
Fyrakk merely grinned. The Lifebinder drove her talons into the earth, shredding the ground underfoot. Wormrest Temple had but a small defense force. Even Iridikron had agreed that it would be a neutral location, so long as the primal dragons were still allowed to use the surrounding territories to hunt. If the ordered dragons there were beset by the Incarnates and Primalists, they would be slaughtered outright. Alexstrasza could not abandon them, nor allow Wormrest Temple to fall. Beside her mounting casualties, it would signal to their enemies that she was too weak to lead the dragon flights.
What will you have us do, my queen? Neltharion asked. We will not abandon our own in this hopeless hour, Alexstrasza said, staring straight into Fyrakk's eyes as she said the words aloud. Her cousin's grin only widened. Tell Iridikron, cousin, that if he goes through with this plan, I will claim all the territory from Wormrest Temple to Valdrakken. Our greens will drive the herds from your hunting grounds. Your grand armies will starve.
Fyrakk snarled.
We will set fire to the Broodlands, and you shall burn with us.
Then you will fall like Razageth, Alexstrasza snapped. Neltharion, deal with my cousin. I must go to Wormrest post-haste. I've already knocked one incarnate from the skies, Neltharion said through clenched teeth, stepping toward the blazing one. Overhead, the black dragon circled lower. Fyrakk cackled, dumping his tail on the ground. Malagos, a portal for me and my escort to Wormrest Temple, Alexstrasza said, gesturing to Sarastraz. The rest of you return to the Broodlands and gather an advance force. You cannot go to Wormrest alone, Ysera cried. It could be a trap.
A blue portal appeared before Alexstrasza, shimmering like a watery mirror. Alexstrasza could see the top of Wormrest Temple in its depths. She looked at Neltharion out of the corner of one eye.
Of course it's a trap, but I will not abandon our flights. See to it that I am not alone for long. Reds, to me!
She would brook no further argument. Alexstrasza leapt through the portal, feeling a moment of physical disassociation. A breathless, weightless leap through space, before solid ground materialized under her feet, slippery and cold. A frozen wind bit between Alexstrasza's scales, and a rime of ice coated the membranes of her wings, making them feel heavy, sluggish. The scent of blood saturated the air. Alexstrasza slitted her eyes against the snow. The platform around her was empty, but in the skies above, the silhouettes of dragons ducked and dived through a storm. Sarastraz emerged from the portal. Squinting, he asked,
A storm? Did Malagos send us to the wrong location?
No, Alexstrasza said. She wasn't speaking to Sarastraz, but to the terror rising in her heart. She knew the elemental powers that swirled around Wormrest Temple like she knew her very soul. Trembling, she walked to the edge of the platform and looked to the skies. There, churning the clouds above Wormrest Temple, was Vyranoth. The mere sight of her drove shards of ice into Alexstrasza's heart. Vyranoth no longer looked like the dragon Alexstrasza remembered. Her scales had deepened to cerulean blue, the same color as the heart of a glacier. Sharp, gleaming chunks of ice studded her horns. With each wing beat, she summoned the blizzard into being. Vyranoth was ice incarnate. Alexstrasza's next breath was a sob. The massive incarnate turned her attention to the temple's peak as if she sensed the Lifebinder's presence.
Oh, Vyranoth, Alexstrasza whispered. What have you done?
Vyranoth roared over the fray, her voice cracking with anguish. Beneath it all, the Lifebinder sensed a maelstrom of hurt, anger, desperation, and something else, betrayal. In that moment, all the weight of Alexstrasza's choices as queen came to bear. Beyond the expectations and the pressures, the responsibility she had to her kind, she had failed on perhaps the most intimate level. She had made an oath to a friend and broken it with her next breath. She could never take that back, even as she knew it was in service of the greater good. The Dragon Queen lifted her voice into the winds.
Vyranoth, my friend, please! You were never an advocate for peace. Talk to me. We may solve our differences another way.
She was ever an advocate, my man.
No, Vyranoth howled. You shattered that peace when you allowed your Titan masters to steal the first primal dragon's egg. We once defended our own nest together. Monster! Oathbreaker! Your words are poison. I will hear no more of them.
Vyranoth closed her wings and plunged toward the tower. Adrenaline shocked Alexstrasza's muscles. In a single great bound, she leapt forward and dived off the side of Wyrmrest Temple. As she hurtled toward the ground, she opened her broad wings and filled them with wind. Just before she hit, she engaged her back muscles, beat her wings, and shot forward, leaving an explosion of snow in her wake. To Alexstrasza's horror, the skies and grounds of Wyrmrest Temple had been consumed by war. Dragons, ordered and primal alike, were locked in a battle of tooth and talon. A legion of Tarasek outnumbered the temple's small force of Draconin on the ground. To fight Vyranoth here would be to put more lives in the path of danger. Alexstrasza had heard the tales of Razageth's attack on the Reach. She could not in good conscience put her flights in the path of Vyranoth's fury. Alexstrasza banked around the temple, dodging a blast of Vyranoth's frosty breath. Ice and snow slammed into the temple's western flank. A flash of ruby scales caught Alexstrasza's attention. 2 red dragons swooped down to flank Alexstrasza. One called out, "My queen! Vyranoth is in pursuit! What would you have us do?" "I will deal with Vyranoth myself," Alexstrasza shouted over the winds. "Tell the others to defend Wyrmrest Temple until Neltharion arrives with reinforcements." The red bobbed his head. He ducked and swooped under Alexstrasza, banking northeast. His companion followed him. "You cannot outfly me, Alexstrasza!" Vyranoth roared behind her. Alexstrasza tacked her wings with the wind, turning sharply, and barrel-rolled through an open platform of the temple, heading north. Behind her, Vyranoth roared in frustration. On the ground, an embattled squadron of Draconin defended the tower's north entrance. Alexstrasza dived lower, breathing a hot, healing breath on their ranks, restoring them. The injured rose from the ground and took up their weapons, cheering the Dragon Queen. She flew onward, hoping to draw Vyranoth far from the fray. Up ahead, Galakron's enormous rib bones arched into the sky. Galakron had been dead for centuries, but the cold temperatures of northern Kalimdor had frozen his decaying flesh. Long, desiccated scraps of hide still clung to his bones, swaying in the breeze like battle standards. His eyes had disintegrated into putrefied tarry pits, and his blood had stained the ground black. The skies roiled with rumbling clouds as Alexstrasza wheeled around the crater. The wind picked up, whistling past the bones, hollow and lonely. She'd thought her choice of location a veiled threat. The aspects could fell a beast like Galakron. Why should the incarnates think they had a chance? But how she feared it had been received as a provocation, a challenge. Fortunately, the crater around Galakron's remains was devoid of life. Even the tiny creeping things had abandoned this place. No innocent life would be lost amid the crossfire. Over Alexstrasza's head, the clouds darkened. Vyranoth burst into view, her body bristling with ice. On instinct, Alexstrasza folded her wings against her body and dived beneath the incarnate, hurtling toward the crater. "Alexstrasza!" Vyranoth roared. "You will answer for your betrayal!" "But not with my life," Alexstrasza thought. "Nor will I take yours." Alexstrasza swooped through Galakron's ribcage, then with a powerful beat of her wings, arced high in the air with her snout to the sky. As she turned, Vyranoth slammed into her. The ice incarnate hooked her back talons into the scales that protected Alexstrasza's midsection. The force of the blow took the breath from Alexstrasza's lungs, nearly knocking her senseless. Alexstrasza scrabbled for purchase against Vyranoth's icy hide as the 2 dragons tumbled end over end toward the earth. Wings thrashed, the ground rolled in and out of sight, falling closer. With her longer forelegs, Alexstrasza slashed at Vyranoth's throat. Her claws glanced off pure ice. With a furious roar, Alexstrasza blasted a fiery breath at Vyranoth, melting the ice that protected the incarnate. Vyranoth grunted, perhaps in pain. Before the Dragon Queen could strike, Vyranoth shoved her away. Alexstrasza somersaulted backward, opened her wings, and descended toward the crater at high speed. She had given Vyranoth an opening, foolishly, and she couldn't afford to make a mistake like that again. The next one could cost Alexstrasza her life. Out of the corner of her eye, Alexstrasza spotted Vyranoth ascending toward the gray, low-hanging clouds. Alexstrasza banked to the right, cruising along the crater's rim. Vyranoth had all but disappeared. Hiding. are we? Alexstrasza thought, beating her wings and climbing through the air. She wasn't foolish enough to try to engage Vyranoth inside those icy clouds. Oh no. Vyranoth was known for her cunning. If she wasn't attacking Alexstrasza outright, she had good reason. The wind swirled around Alexstrasza with intention, as if it sought to knock her off course. Did Vyranoth bid the wind to howl so hard? No matter, Alexstrasza had new abilities of her own. Yeah, because I was going to say, they really make it seem like the Primalists are more powerful than Aspects. Alexstrasza hovered above the crater, careful not to touch the unnatural clouds that swirled overhead.
Vyranoth, she called, this day need not end in further bloodshed. You and I both want peace. Let us speak as we once did, as friends, as sisters. Sisters!
Vyranoth cried, her voice carried to Alexstrasza on the wind.
You have taken my true sister from me! There can be no peace until you free Raszageth!
The temperature plunged, rhyming Alexstrasza's scales with more ice. A chill spread down the membranes of the Lifebinder's wings and stiffened her joints, making it difficult to stay aloft. Her muscles grew sluggish. Alexstrasza faltered in the air, sensing Vyranoth's spell a moment too late. A thunderous boom echoed overhead. An axe of frigid air split the clouds and crashed into Alexstrasza, throwing her to the ground. She slammed into the bottom of the crater, sliding through the black muck until she collided with Galakron's stinking skull.
Do you know what I hope for, friend?
Vyranoth called, dipping below the cloud line.
I hope that what I once feared most has come to pass. That your master's order magic has altered your mind. You cannot be the dragon I once knew.
Alexstrasza stumbled to her feet with a groan, then shook the muddy snow from her hide. The left half of her body ached. Her scales were scuffed and stuffed with dirty ice. Wincing, she flexed one foot and stretched out her wind, testing each limb. Bruised, but not broken. She lifted her gaze skyward. Even from this distance, Alexstrasza could see Vyranoth's injuries, including the heat that licked at the Incarnate's throat. Those burns would sink deep into the Incarnate's flesh. But the pain in Vyranoth's eyes, it was worse. The Incarnate's grief ran deep, and Alexstrasza suffered it with her. It was as if the Lifebinder's own heart was being torn from her chest and clawed to pieces. Even as Vyranoth turned against her now, Alexstrasza would not hate her for it. No, she could empathize with her friend's position. Alexstrasza had made a promise to Vyranoth, and in her pursuit of protecting others, she had turned her back on her oldest and dearest friend. Not to mention the moral implications of stealing babies.
I empathize with you, Vyranoth.
I do, Alexstrasza called to the skies.
But that does not mean I agree with you. Raszageth, your sister, marched on the Reach with no provocation, killing hundreds of innocents. Before her imprisonment, she spent decades slaughtering defenseless mortals and Terrasek and villages across Kalimdor. And now you point a talon at me.
No, my old friend, Alexstrasza continued, dropping her chin to her chest and ruffling the scales around her shoulders. Spreading her wings, she leapt aloft in a blaze of crimson flame.
You have thrown your lot in with more warmongers and murderers, and if you insist on following this path, then it is I who no longer recognize you.
Vyranoth roared, lunging toward the Lifebinder. Alexstrasza beat her wings harder, whipping the flames around her into an inferno, faster and faster until she glowed like the sun. Vyranoth checked her descent with a snarl, wincing at the light.
Hear me now, Alexstrasza said. I will not stand aside while the Incarnates continue their reign of cruelty across this world. Not while I am Lifebinder and Dragon Queen. If that places us on opposite sides of the conflict, so be it.
With those words, Alexstrasza swept her wings up with intention. Her crimson flames exploded outward with a roar, blasting Vyranoth's blizzard back for 10, 20, then 50 wing lengths. Sunlight stumbled through a freshly made crater in the clouds. The sky above was blue as dragon scales. Vyranoth beat her wings, backing away from the Lifebinder.
I pity you, Alexstrasza, she said. Your precious oaths have blocked you to the noble aims that once guided you. Now you see the horrors of the means by which you have achieved your ends. Would you have stolen my clutch given the chance? What would you have done if I had kidnapped yours? When you are convinced of your own righteousness, No act becomes unconscionable, the incarnate hissed. Think on that when your flight calls you queen.
Those words cut to the quick. Alexstrasza drew a sharp breath, but before she could reply, a dragon's bugle sounded over the tundra. She turned her head, spotting the black aspect sailing forth with an entire wing of black dragons. Neltharion.
Retreat, Vyranoth,
Neltharion roared.
You cannot hope to stand against 5 aspects and their armies. I shall give you 3 moons to release Razageth, Alexstrasza,
Vyranoth said, tossing her head.
Else I shall fly on the Broodlands and take my vengeance. I cannot save the young you stole from us, but I can save one of our kind. I will take my sister back, even if I must carve a path through your dragonflights to do so.
As Vyranoth retreated with the remainder of her forces, Alexstrasza felt the adrenaline in her system ebb, leaving her feeling empty, exhausted. Neltharion approached.
Are you hurt? A few bruises, nothing more.
Alexstrasza rolled her shoulders and tested her wing muscles.
She struck my heart true, though. I have failed her, Neltharion. I have turned her against us, but now our flights will pay the price for the secrets I kept.
Neltharion turned his head, watching Vyranoth retreat.
It was no fault of yours, Alexstrasza. The aspect schools have ever been opposed to the incarnates. It was only a matter of time before our efforts to defend the Broodlands came into conflict with their activities. True peace was never an option with Iridikron. Our path was soaked in blood from the beginning. I wish it were not so, Alexstrasza replied. I wish he would see reason. One cannot argue with the stubbornness of stone,
Neltharion said, casting Alexstrasza a knowing look.
That may be the truest thing you have yet said, she replied.
With a heavy heart, she turned away from Vyranoth's fading form.
Very well, Neltharion. Let us prepare the Broodlands for war.
Yeah, and it's not just as black and white as, like, they stole their babies. Because do we honestly think that had they not taken them, the primalist dragons, who, one, were not exactly creating a system to nurture and raise the babies, but even so, would they, in their turn, give the babies an opportunity to choose the order magic? If so, in an ideal system, what would have had to have been worked out would be kind of like a neutral situation for eggs to be hatched. But the order dragons were at such a disadvantage because their numbers were so smaller. So even if they did that, they would never really catch up. So that they were kind of screwed from the start, if we're being realistic, because let's just say the primal dragons so vastly outnumbered them that even if they did that kind of neutral thing, these are not dragons that are being born by ordered dragons. All of those are just automatically staying. They're dragons that are being born to dragons that, by after a certain point, have chosen to stay primal dragons. So, without open lines of kind of ambassadorship where they're trying to constantly recruit and change them to ordered dragons and then give the eggs the opportunity, or at least go open and say, look, if nothing else, just open from the beginning. If we find eggs unwatched, we're going to take them. Because even that would be, at least you're wearing it on your sleeve. But yeah, it's kind of tough because it is rough what they did, but it also, the alternative would be to just automatically lose. Because even now, they're greatly outnumbered and they've been stealing eggs forever. It does create its own set of problems, but it's tough. And the other problem is that if at any point there was a sensation of weakness, the primal dragons would absolutely have gone for the ordered dragons from the beginning. Vyranoth returned to her home in the Frozen Fangs, commanding her wing leaders to leave her in peace. The frigid winds of the north would numb her to the fractures in her heart. Rage had driven her to turn wing and talon against a dragon she had loved so long and so well. But now in the quiet moments, Vyranoth still had to reckon with the pain of Alexstrasza's betrayal. She wanted to do so alone. As she drew closer to her eyrie, she noticed a little shadow following in her wake. When she turned her head, she sometimes spotted a flash of red among the fang's snow-capped peaks. With a growl, Vyranoth launched herself into the icy low-hanging clouds overhead. Thus concealed, she pivoted and hovered in the air, watching. A small red, no more than a drake, and a young one at that, crawled from a crack in the mountain rock, turning his head left, then right. He scrambled forward onto a ledge, his talons slipping on the ice, scanning the horizon. If he was an agent of the red dragonflight, he was a poor one. Still, Vyranoth was in no mood for games. She summoned up a long, sharp spear of ice, then sent it whistling toward the red. It slammed into the ledge beside him, frightening him so much that he nearly slid off the ledge and tumbled into the chasm below.
What do you want, spawn of Alexstrasza? Vyranoth roared from the clouds. I have no patience for your kind today.
Oh, it's the one that was already discontent.
I do not mean you harm, great incarnate, the little red shouted, bowing his head and trembling. Nor am I here at the behest of the Dragon Queen. I only wish to ask you a question. Be gone,
Vyranoth replied with a curl of her lip, preparing to send another spear of ice straight for him. This time she wouldn't miss.
Is it true the aspects kidnapped eggs from primal dragons? The red called out.
Vyranoth paused, snarling.
Yes, she said. I believe I was one of those eggs.
The drake took wing, rising toward her in the sky.
My name is Talonstraws, and I am one of several drakes who remembers being taken.
Talonstraws. Vyranoth recalled that name from days long past. Back then he had been a shivering little whelp who sought shelter beneath her wing. He and his sister, Leylastrasza, had been afraid of being taken. Now Vyranoth finally knew why.
I know your face,
Vyranoth said, cocking her head to one side, her heart softening.
What do you want, little one?
The truth, Talonstraws replied as Vyranoth descended from the clouds to meet him.
The Dragon Queen lied to me about where I came from, who I am.
Alexstrasza has lied to us all.
Come with me, young one. We should talk.
And here's the other, almost the sharper cut from the sword. You are now going to create, even of the eggs that you, by doing it this route, how many will you leave? How weak will the loyalty be for this faction? You know, because it doesn't matter at all. Teens, I don't care if they're dragons or whatnot, they're all different. And there is just going to be a percentage of them that rebel, that don't feel like they fit in with their family or whatever. I have 4 kids, and 3 out of 4, you know, to more or less follow in my wife's or my footsteps and have a certain amount of loyalty. But one of my kids, all 4 raised exactly the same. One of my kids, as soon as he could, he bolted. And he did not, I mean, we might see him once or twice a year now. He just wanted nothing to do with us. And as a parent, that's super, super hard. But also, you know, you got to play the odds. And everyone is an individual. And for whatever myriad number of reasons, it just doesn't work out. You know, everyone has their own personality. And whether it's because you feel too different or you feel inept, you know, like you're not accomplishing the things that, like my son that left, that we don't, you know, that my semi-estranged son, I don't know, I can only speculate. He can, you know, the justifications he's told his siblings, because he talks to them a little bit more, is that, you know, he felt that there were certain betrayals that happened on his part when he was a teenager, but he always struggled in school. And more than just the struggle, he wasn't into it. So academics and being successful in that arena is something we value at my house. Of my 4 kids, he was the one that wanted to experiment with, you know, drinking, drugs, you know, sex and stuff like that at a young age. Whereas my other children did that, they were pretty well behaved. My youngest son's only 13, but he doesn't show any signs of that kind of thing. Whereas by 13, my other son was already just having intensely combative moments, just these moments of great stubbornness, just fighting and bucking the system, and in different ways. He was always been a good worker. And when he, as he got older into his high school years, he became a mechanic and did things like that. Things that he couldn't emulate because we do have people in our family, my dad, my wife's dad, that are welders. Both of our dads are welders. So there's certainly that. And he always got along well with the grandparents. But my wife and I are more college educated, and my wife's a nurse, and I have advanced degrees. And, so I think there's something to be said about living in your parents' shadow. There's something to be said about being the narrator of your own history. And I think, and to tie this all back in, this is what's happening with these dragons here. You just have to, if you give a child that justification, teenage angst is going to happen, and you would hope that a child comes around. Even the ones that butt heads with you, they come around eventually for the most part. Like my other daughter really butted heads. She went through a period in her teenage years. But once she hit her 20s, she kind of came around and matured up a little bit. But yeah, it didn't happen with my son because he had these moments in his own narrated history where he felt like there were these unforgivables. He felt like there were these wrongs, regardless of how you want to debate the situation. and that can set someone down a path. That can crystallize, because I was actually just listening. I know you can go ahead and turn off the episode, but these are these thoughts. So sometimes this is what you get with me. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was with Bradley Cooper, the actor. And this is a guy who's gone through his own issues with, substance abuse and low self-esteem and the way that fame affects those kind of topics. And he talked about how, through the years of counseling he's had to do, and court ordered and stuff, and the therapy and everything, that one of the things he had to learn was when you reach a certain age, and probably for a lot of us it doesn't happen until we get to middle age or beyond, you realize that, or you can realize, we don't all realize this, but you can realize that so much of how you define yourself is the story you tell. And the more times you tell a story, the more that this is his words, not mine, the more that your identity narrows. So as soon as you realize that story is just that, it's just a story, and you can really free yourself from that shackle and start examining it, it allows you the freedom to change who you are. And most of us do need to constantly change and grow. So for myself, I have my own narratives about the different things that happened in my life, and that's a whole nother, we'll save that for the psychology podcast. But even for myself to be able to, I recognize that I've done that for a long time. I've defined myself in the context of my upbringing, when those were just events and I'm just telling a story. And it's very hard to do that. It's very hard because it's so easy. How many times do you meet a new friend, a new romantic partner, a coworker, and you're able to answer these questions? Well, my dad left, or I'm an orphan, or my parent, there was drug addiction, there were drug or substance abuse issues with my parents, my family, my siblings, myself, etc. These different things that define us. Oh, I'm from a small town. I was never good at math. Whatever these particular narratives are, and they start to define who you are, and they really put you on rails. And here we see just a great example of that, where you can just see where it's also relatable with the little baby dragon. And this is what happens with us. So you have to be so careful when you're young, because it really does take the context of life to, I think, break that train. So that's it. That's my philosophy. This was a long chapter enough, and then you got some more talking from me. And I'm torn with this book. There are certain parts that I'm frustrated because I'm always frustrated when I read a book, and I'm just like, gosh, if you just talked it out, man. If they just tried to find a reasonable compromise and came to the table, you could avoid so much of this pain. And I hate that in a narrative. Obviously avoidable pain. A good person who avoids that a lot of the time is R.A. Salvatore. If you read the Dritz books, he's a good writer. He tries to avoid the easy writing path. But from the flip side, this story is so full of gray, and I mentioned that on previous episodes, that it's pretty good. You can really see justified, righteous anger coming from both sides. And we're going to see how that unfolds. So things are getting intense and hot and heavy, or cold and heavy, depending on which dragon you're looking at. This episode's in the pipe 5x5. Thank you guys so much for listening and for tolerating me. And I love you all. And I'll see y'all next time on Lore of Warcraft.